All right, we are back. Dynasty Trades in 5. I'm Clay.
I'm Shane.
And I am Scott. And I got a 2023 first round pick with me right now.
Nice. Yes, we're gonna do something a little bit different here. We're still gonna do our player profiles and whatnot, our dynasty trades in not 5 minutes, but we're gonna mess around here, talk a little bit about the 2022 rookie draft. You know, we've got these picks now, we've got numbers attached to the picks, and everybody's like this player or this pick. We're just gonna give our general thoughts on this class and what we're gonna do with those picks. So let's start with you, Mr. Shane. Scott went last time. Hello, sir.
So the general consensus in the Twitterverse and the Dynasty Pandemic verse and some of the patron chats that we're in is that this class is bad. It's really bad. Or this class is sneaky good and no one knows what they're talking about. So it's either really good or really bad from what I gather, which can I let you know a little secret after I've been playing Dynasty for a few years. That's mostly every draft class, which means this is probably an average draft class. There's, right now we're saying there's no superstar running backs, right? Except Brees Hall is. There's really no consensus QB1, except probably Matt Corral. Wide receiver all over the place, right? You got people that like Garrett Wilson, and then you have people like me that like David Bell because we like good football players. You have people that like Drake London because he has a cool name or they think he's a rapper. The one thing we don't really have is an elite tight end, right? We don't have an elite tight end in this class. I think we can all agree on that. So this makes it like any other class, to be quite honest with you. You're going to hear the same talk that you hear every year. Well, I think this is a good class to trade back here because you can get the same range of guys. You can get the same range of guys at 105 that you couldn't at 110. Or this is a draft where you can really go get the guys you like. It's the same as every class. It literally is. There's only been I've been playing Dynasty, I think 7 years. There's been like 2 absolute trash can drafts where you're like, this is bad. Get the hell out of it. All that said, I would trade absolutely any 2022 pick for a 2023 first. And that's not because I think this is a bad class. It's just that the 2023 class is ridiculously stacked at every position. And I don't know about tight end. I will admit, I don't know if Michael Myers and a couple of those other guys are going to be coming out at that point if they'll be old enough. This is the most fun time of the year, right? So go nuts, kids. Use those draft picks. If you're bad at drafting and you've been bad at drafting, trade those picks for some players that have done something so you don't have to figure out if they're going to be good. And you know who you are. There's guys in a bunch of us that are in dynasty leagues that we make rookie picks every year, and we're like, this is the year, and this year happens to be Laquan Treadwell. And then the next year, you're like, this is the year, and you get N'Keal Harry. Well, maybe this just drafting isn't for you, but you know what? These are trade assets, so use them as such. That's all I have.
Yeah, so I see this class as just looking at it as a whole. One good thing about this class is it has a lot of players, which means when you get into the middle and later rounds, there's going to be a lot more to choose from than last year, especially. But even in some previous years, 2020 was like this, where we can say all the players are the same, but when you're in the 4th round of your rookie draft and you're able to get guys that were drafted in the 4th or 5th round of the NFL draft, there's going to be some more value in having extra picks this year. That said, I think this running back class is deep, but it's very, very average at the top. It's going to look a lot like the 2019 running back class. That was the Jacobs, Montgomery, Miles Sanders class. I think the receiver class is going to look a lot like 2020. You're going to end up having 8 to 12 receivers that go off the board in this desirable range, like the top 70, 75 picks. And there's going to be some that people are going to fade because of their landing spot, or the wide receiver 10 might come off the board in the middle of the 2nd round. And you're like, well, that's wide receiver 10, but where should like a mid to late 2nd round receiver go in most classes? So it's going to appear deeper than I think other people want to give it credit for. At the same time, I just looked through in the ADP. There's probably 60 receivers right now in Dynasty that I feel comfortable with having to varying levels. Some of them are veterans that have produced a ton. Some of them are guys that had profiles that used to be valuable. They're not so valuable now because they haven't done anything, but I still want them. There's still guys where I'm like, hey, I'd like to buy in on that player, get some more shares for the season. So that's about 60. That's going to go up to like 70 plus once the draft class hits. And this quarterback class is one of the worst quarterback classes we've seen. Not only can you argue that there's not a ton of ceiling in this quarterback class with what we've talked about on some prior videos, but I actually think the quarterbacks that have the ceiling are not going to be the ones that get drafted in the best spots and or the highest.
Right.
Now it comes down to, okay, you might really like Malik Willis, but if he goes at the very end of the first round, are you really going to reach and take him at the 101 or the 102? And it just feels like that's a bad process, taking a guy that's drafted outside of the top 15, regardless of the profile. That's a bad process. So you tell me a class is strong at wide receiver. I like receivers. Receivers, that's actually favorable if you have a lot of picks for that one reason. We both know it's a wide receiver market, right? That right now everyone's chasing receivers. Everyone's chasing receivers that they think can be really good. So there's a lot of those. So that's what people want the picks for. But I'm looking at this draft going, man, it really feels bad when I'm looking at the 101 or the 102 and I'm debating taking a receiver because I'm scared of everybody else.
Yep.
So then it's like we did the T. Higgins video and the CD Lamb video, and it's like the 102 or those guys. It's like, well, if I'm literally sitting there going, man, I really want to get that number one receiver in the class, then that's not a good use, I think, of the 102, which pushes back to Shane's argument of probably at the 105, 106. And people think this is blasphemy. I'm fine pivoting off straight up for a 2023 first and try to get more. Sure. Give me your 23 first and a second if I'm giving you the 106. But I think you're going to get into drafts and people are going to go, yeah, there's a lot of good players in this draft between 107, 108 and like 304. But I don't really care who I get as long as I have some picks in there. Give me 3 or 4 shots. I'll load up on a couple backup running backs or maybe a tight end or maybe a quarterback that goes in the mid-second, but I'm not paying a premium for that. So that's my take early on. Deep class. I'm actually interested in trading back if I can, but I think that's going to be a fruitless. That's going to be a fruitless exercise when we get on the clock. You're not going to be able to move back for 3 picks. I just don't think the demand's going to be there.
Yeah, because everybody's going to be on the clock and be like, I don't know who to take either. When you're trying to trade them the pick, they're it's a crapshoot for them too. So I mean, it's picks always gain value, right? As you get closer to the draft, they're always going to gain in value. But it seems like with this one, especially, you really want to have a top 5 or 6 pick, like you're saying. So the value of those picks is going to be crazy.
I think what you just said, the value of those picks are going to be crazy, but it's going to be for a reason that I would prefer to fade. It's going to be crazy because people feel scared of the picks outside of a certain range. So they're going to feel safer about having a higher pick simply because they think they're going to have a better shot of not hitting on a bust, if that makes sense. It's not because, hey, this class has 5 stacked players that I have to have. It's going to be, well, I have a better shot if I can take a safer pick, like a early second round running back or a top 15 quarterback. Like I feel safer with that. So I want a higher pick. I don't think you're getting a higher quality at that pick, if that makes sense. So I'll go the opposite. If I'm stuck on the 106 and the only offer I have is the 111 and the 201, and I really don't like what I'm getting at the 106, I'll just take the 2 shots because I can probably fit some roster construction parameters around those 2 picks versus 1. So
I gotta be honest with you. In general, if you're in a rookie draft like that, you should probably always be willing to make that move. When there is no consensus, and you're not really tied to like, oh, I'm getting Jamar Chase here, because you're not. You know what I mean? So I always like that strategy in a class where you're not 100% sure. Last year, I didn't like that strategy, obviously, because we had 87 quarterbacks in the draft, which really, helped make that top one. I think the tier really didn't break to like 111 or so. And I didn't want to move back and end up getting Michael Carter when I could have gotten, Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith earlier. Hey, Michael Carter ended up being good. So that worked out for everyone.
Yeah, well, you took Trey Sermon. He worked out.
Oh, Trey Sermon was a bad move. Don't take him.
Shot across the bow.
Yeah.
There. So if the 23 class is so awesome, right? So we think even early seconds in 23 would be good, right? Early mid seconds in 23. Basically, my question is, where in the second in 2022 do you just want to straight up punt for a 23 second? Like if you're sitting on the clock at 2:04 in this upcoming draft, would you punt for a 23 second? No, right?
No, I'm the opposite.
It's
I
just
want
applies to the
more.
first.
I want more shots in this class. I want to be able to control as many of the top 15 or so picks next year. Because I think what you're going to get next year is a stacked running back class, 3 or 4 high-end prototype quarterbacks. Then you're going to have the receivers. The receivers are there in every draft, right? There's maybe not 10 of them. Every draft, there's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 receivers that go in this range because the NFL needs more receivers. Every team, every year, there's 10 teams that need to add a receiver in the first 2 rounds every year. So I'm never worried about a class not giving me receivers, but just take like this year's like 104 to 110, like that range of receivers, push it next year to like 111 through 205.
Gotcha.
You know, it's kind of like last year's class without Chase. Same thing. Nobody traded back in those picks because you looked at it and you go, quarterbacks and running backs. Those are what's scarce. Those are what's driving the market in Dynasty. I cannot trade back and get outside of that running back or quarterback range. That's what everyone was scared to do.
Yep.
In hindsight, man, if you would have traded out of the Travis Etienne pick and drafted Jalen Waddle and Elijah Moore, then you killed the other team in the trade. But that's hindsight. I mean, I think at the time we would have all been like, man, you got to take the first round running back, right? Versus the, 2 or 1 second round, 1 first round receiver. So it always looks back, trade back, trade back, trade back. But the people that profess that, okay, on the clock, are you giving up the one guy that is within the tier, right? There's a tier of 4 and you're at the 4th spot. Are you really going to give that up to get outside of the tier? A lot of people that preach it don't actually do it.
Have Godwin or the 106?
2022?
Yeah.
I should get more back than the 106, to be quite honest with you. Push comes to shove because I have an addiction to trading and rookies. There's a good chance that I'll take that 106 and then live to regret it later. Probably towards the tail end of 2022 when he's back fully healthy and he puts up 260 yards.
Yeah, it feels like, and I kind of got into this today on Twitter too. It feels like that trade is a fair deal, both sides, because there's going to be players available in this draft that if they fall to the 106, I'd rather have them over Godwin. But I'm looking kind of like receiver for receiver. You know what I mean? If I can get one of the top 2 receivers, whoever they are, I don't even know who they're going to be. It could be London. It could be Wilson. It could be Chris Olave. It could be Treylon Burks. I mean, whoever. The top 2 guys off the board, whatever the consensus is, I'm probably going to want them over Godwin. But what if I get in a draft where it's like it goes receiver, 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 receiver? Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a late second round running back that I may not like. You know what I mean? That's where I'm like, man, I want to get out of that pick.
So would you take Austin Eckler or the 104?
Come on, Shane.
I'm going to take Eckler.
I think that's fair. I think you get, if it's a running back to running back deal, I think you could argue that you're going to take a shot on one of the rookie running backs and you could be okay with that. I can get behind taking the 104.
Yeah, I'm scared. I have a feeling that Breece Hall's already off the board. Kenneth Walker's off the board. And I don't know. I'm obviously not an NFL scout because I'm on this show. But I don't know that Isaiah Spiller straight up for Austin Eckler is a move I want to make.
Okay, I'm going to play it.
But would you take the wide receiver 1 there, though, instead of Eckler?
Yes, most likely, yes. Well, yes, not even most likely.
Because if I told you it's probably not T. Higgins, it's probably a bit below that. But I told you Deontay Johnson or Austin Eckler, what side?
Deontay Johnson.
I would argue that the wide receiver 1 in this class will be worth more than Deontay Johnson.
Most likely.
Right in the range. So there you go.
But also looking at the values, I should get more back for Austin Eckler than just a singular pick. I don't care if it's a second or a third rounder, something to make me feel better inside.
Scott, right now I send you the 2022, or I send you a 23 first. Are you going to give me the 2022 107?
Yes.
Oh, snap. What about you, Shane? You going to do that move right now?
I wasn't listening. What?
If I send you a 23 first, are you going to give me the 2022 107?
Yes.
Are you going to give me the 106?
50-50, yes.
Scott, 106.
I think that's the breaking point. My tie break would be I look at your quarterbacks, and that's kind of how I gauge where I think your team's going to go. If I see a quarterback room and it's like Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan or something like that, I'm like, you know what? I will bet against that.
Give me that first. Yep.